Hello and welcome to Module 2. This is Chris taking you through Module 2 of IELTS Writing Task 1. We're going to focus on two things today. First, we're going to look at the structure of all Task 1 questions. We're going to look at the 7 types of those questions. And then we're going to look at the marking criteria. And I'm going to illustrate those using do's and don'ts for each of the 4 marking criteria. So these are the two things we're going to do, looking at the different types of questions and looking at the marking criteria. So let's look at the structure of every Task 1 question. Every Task 1 question has 3 things. It never changes. It's always these 3 things. First, you'll be given a question statement, then you'll be given instructions, and then you'll be given a data source. So let's look at each of these 3 things in more detail. So this is an example of 2 of these things. I'll just highlight this here. So this part, this is your statement. Okay, the statement tells you what the data source is about. It tells you what the whole task is about. And this will change every single time. Obviously, because the questions are different, because the data source is different, this will change every time. But there will always be a general statement like this. And then there will be instructions. So these are your instructions. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features, and make comparisons where relevant. Write at least 150 words. So the great thing about this is it never changes. It always says summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So this is great for us because we know exactly what to do, and it helps us use the same structure and the same approach to every single question. Then we have a data source. So the data source will always just be data and represented in a different way. So in this particular one, it is 2 different bar graphs. So it is data, it is numbers, and it is represented by 2 different bar graphs. Let's look at the other types. So the first one is a line graph. Second one is a bar chart. The third one is a pie chart. Fourth is a table. 5 is multiple graphs. 6 is a process diagram, and 7 is a map or maps. So this is a line graph. So what you need to remember is don't be scared if you've never seen line graphs or bar charts before, or you're not familiar with them. The one thing you should remember is it's just numbers. All it is numbers represented in a visual way, just to make it easier to understand. And the more you do these, the simpler they become. So don't worry if you haven't seen too many of these before. So as you can see at the top here, it tells you the question statement, and then these are your instructions, and then this is your data source. Next one is a bar chart. So a bar chart is again just numbers, just data, but represented by a bar chart. The next one is a pie chart. Exactly the same, it's just numbers, but this time they use a pie to show the different proportions of them. And it's not always 4 pie charts. In this particular example, it's 4 pie charts. Could be just 1 pie chart, or it could be 2, 3, 4. This is a table. So this is slightly different from the other 3 because this is just the raw data. This is just the numbers, not visually represented. So you have no line graph, you have no bars, or you have no pie. So some people don't like these as much because they're more difficult to understand. But we're going to do a whole lesson on this, so don't worry if it looks scary right now. This is the 5th type, which is multiple graphs or multiple charts, more than one data source. So what you get is a pie chart and a table, or a line graph and a bar chart, or a pie chart and a bar chart, just multiple different graphs. And again, don't worry if this looks scary. I'm going to break it down into simpler, easy to understand language later on. This is a process diagram. So here you'll be given either a man-made process, like how to make bricks in this one, or how to make Coca-Cola, or how to make shoes, or how to make a car. It will be anything man-made like that, and you will just be given step-by-step pictures, and you will have to describe that process. Or it could be a natural process, like the water cycle. or the life cycle of a butterfly or something like that. So you'll always be given pictures one after the other like this, and you just describe the pictures. So this is different from the other ones because you're not describing data, you're describing a process. We're going to have a full module on process questions in module 11. And this finally is our last one. It's a map or maps. So you might get one map, or it's more likely that you will get two maps of the same place, 2 or 3 maps of the same place over time, and you have to describe how the town or how the city has changed over time. And we're going to do a full lesson on that in module 12. So don't panic if you're looking at all of those graphs and charts and you're thinking, oh my god, I'm never going to be able to answer any of those questions. Don't worry. Everyone who looks at task 1 questions for the first time starts to panic and they think that they'll never be able to get them done. Believe me, after the 12 modules, you'll be able to do them and they'll become much simpler. So I'm going to break everything down into simpler, easy to understand methods and strategies later on. That was just to show you the 7 different types. All you have to understand at this stage is this difference between the 7 different types. Don't worry about them. We're going to look at them in much more detail later. So this is the marking criteria. Every IELTS examiner, when they're marking task 1, has this right beside them. And they use these 4 criteria: task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, to give you a band score. So you'll see along here are the band scores. So 6, 7, 8, 9. And then there's another page with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but you don't have to worry about that. You'll not get those scores. You want to be getting band 7, band 8, or some of you might even get band 9. So what they do is they look at all of this information and they give you a band score depending on what you did and didn't do. Don't worry about this type of language that they're using. The language that they're using is very, very difficult to understand, and it's very difficult to know what they want you to do and what they don't want you to do. This is on purpose. IELTS don't want people to know exactly what to do and what not to do. If everyone knew exactly what to do, then everyone would get a band 7 or a band 8 or a band 9. So this is supposed to be very complicated language. But luckily you've bought this course. I'm going to break everything down into simple, easy to understand language for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a list of do's and a list of don'ts for each of the 4 criteria. And if you do those things and you don't do the other things, you will get a band 7, a band 8, or a band 9. So the first one is task achievement. So I've broken this down. I'm using the same language as this, but I just wanted to show you it in an easier to understand format just for task achievement. So this is band 6, band 7, band 8, and band 9. Task achievement is sometimes referred to as task response, and it just means, did you answer the question correctly? So this is one of 4 criteria, and this criteria judges your ability to answer the question. So let's look at the things you should do in order to answer the question correctly. First thing you should do is you have to identify the key features. So if you think back to the table that I showed you, there is lots and lots and lots of information. You don't report everything. You don't have time, and the question is not asking you to do that. What they want you to do is pick out the most important information. This is the key features, and we're going to look at how to do that in a later module. Then you have to report these key features, generally in an overview. An overview is a separate paragraph which just tells the examiner in very general terms what are the 2 or 3 or 4 most important things about the graph or the table or the pie chart. And the overview is the most important paragraph in the whole of your task 1 essay, because if you don't write an effective one, you can't get over a 6 for task response. So we're going to do a whole module on how to write an overview in module 5. Then you report the key features with specific data in the details paragraph. So we have a paragraph for our overview, and then we skip a line and we start a new paragraph. And you write 1 or 2 paragraphs where you report the data. And the data has to be accurate, and it has to support your key features. And you must write over 150 words. So not just under or not around 150 words, it must be over. If you don't go over 150 words, you can't get above a band 5 for task achievement. So things that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't write about everything you see. Remember, the language that they use is key features, the most important things. So if you just write about every single piece of data, then you will get a low score because you haven't picked out the most important stuff. The next thing you shouldn't do is you shouldn't report any data in your overview. Your overview is just generally what's happening. You're not talking about any data. Your data comes later in your details paragraphs. So if you write data in your overview, it's not effective, you get a lower mark. If you report the wrong data or inaccurate data, of course you haven't answered the question correctly. You should never include your opinion in task 1. Task 2 is where you give your opinion about whatever they ask you. You will have lots of chances to give your opinion in task 2, but in task 1, you should never give your opinion. Task 1 is just about reporting facts. It is about reporting data or reporting a map or writing about a process. You don't say why the graph goes up or why the graph goes down. It doesn't give you any information about that. All you do is just write exactly what you see. So you don't include any opinion, and you only include the things that are in the diagram or on the chart or on the pie chart or on the table. You should never write a conclusion. Lots of books and lots of teachers talk about writing a conclusion in task 1. What they mean is an overview. Lots of people get confused between an overview and a conclusion. An overview is just stating what you see in a general way, stating the most important information. A conclusion is summarizing your opinion, what you think about the data. However, you don't get a chance to give your opinion. There should be no opinion in task 1, therefore you don't include a conclusion. If you write a conclusion, if you say in conclusion and then summarize your opinion, you'll probably get a band 5 or maybe a band 6 for task response. So here is the marking criteria for coherence and cohesion. If you want, you can pause the video and have a look at what the official IELTS criteria says. It's probably a better thing just to listen to my do's and don'ts, and then you can come back and look at it. So coherence and cohesion. What does coherence mean? Coherence means that your answer makes sense, that it is logical, that it is easy to read, that it is easy to understand. Cohesion means that your paragraphs and your sentences and parts of your sentences link together well and link together in a logical way. So first thing you must do is you must have a clear structure. You must have a clear paragraph structure. You don't have to worry about that because I'm going to give you the exact structure that you should use in order to get high marks. So don't worry about that just yet. You have to organize your information logically. So that means that the information is ordered in a logical way. So that is connected to the structure. If you use my structure, and I'm also going to show you how to organize your data within each of the paragraphs, you will get high marks for this. Use linking words. So linking words are words like in contrast, overall, however, therefore, things like this. You must use them appropriately so that is at the right time. So if you're giving your overview, an appropriate word to use for your overview will be overall. An inappropriate word would be in conclusion, because you're not writing a conclusion, you're writing an overview. If you are making a comparison or contrasting something, you would use in contrast, but you wouldn't use something like moreover, because moreover is used when you're adding another point. So you must also use them accurately. So the grammar needs to be correct, the spelling needs to be correct. You will get lower marks if you don't use them accurately. So using linking words only when appropriate, and they must be accurate. Using referencing. So when you're talking about one of the data points, you use words like it, they, this. And we're going to talk about that in much more detail in module 10, where we're going to show you all about the grammar and vocabulary that you must use. So here are things that you should not do in order to get high marks for coherence and cohesion. You shouldn't write one long answer. The examiner will be looking for your paragraph structure. How have you used paragraphing? If you don't skip a line and everything is just squashed into one big essay, the examiner doesn't know where your introduction ends and when your overview starts. And they can't tell the difference between the different paragraphs. So one quick tip for that is just to skip a line between paragraphs, and then the examiner will be able to clearly see your paragraphs. Don't try to get marks by using as many linking words as possible. Some students put a linking word, or sometimes they're called cohesive devices, at the beginning and in the middle of every single sentence. So every sentence begins with however, moreover, in addition, blah blah blah. This is not how you get high marks for using linking words. You get high marks for using linking words appropriately and accurately. Appropriately is the key word there. You only use them when needed. You don't get more marks for just adding in more linking words. So don't overuse linking words. Only use them when necessary. I'm going to show you lots of sample answers of my sample answers, and I'm going to show you how often I use them, and you'll be surprised at how little I actually use them. People who get a band 9 use them as little as possible. Don't try to find comparisons that are not there. So remember, if you think back to the question, the instructions always say report or find comparisons where relevant. So there won't be comparisons every time. Sometimes there will be, so you report them because it's relevant to do so, but sometimes there will not be any comparisons. Remember that coherence means that your answer makes sense. If you're writing about comparisons that are just not in there, then your answer won't make sense and it will be difficult to understand. So some students have been told by teachers that you must always find a comparison. You must always report the comparison. No, sometimes you'll have to do it, sometimes you won't. If you have to do it, it will be very obvious. You'll be able to make a comparison, and we're going to look at that in further modules. Here is the lexical resource. So here is the official IELTS marking criteria for this. Lexical resource just means vocabulary. That's all it means. It's just a fancy word for vocabulary. So again, feel free to pause the video if you want, but it's probably better if you listen to my do's and don'ts and then come back and look at this later. So, things you should do with vocabulary. You must use a range of vocabulary. Don't use the same words again and again and again. Use vocabulary for describing data accurately and appropriately. So there is very, very specific vocabulary that you need to describe a pie chart, for example, or there's very specific vocabulary you need to describe a process. And I'm going to give you that in module 10. But the thing you must bear in mind is it must be accurate. So it must be spelled correctly, the collocations need to be correct, the meaning needs to be correct, and it must be appropriate to use that in that sentence. Use appropriate collocations. So collocations are words that normally go together, and we're going to show you that in module 10. This is very important. You should think accuracy first. Lexical resource and grammar is a balancing range and accuracy. So range means that you use a wide range of vocabulary, wide range of words. Accuracy means that they are correct. The problem is the wider range of vocabulary that you use, the more chance you have of making a mistake. So which is more important? Is it more important to use a range of vocabulary, or is it more important to be correct? I and most IELTS examiners, including some of the very top IELTS examiners I've worked with, all say that accuracy is the most important thing. If you go in and you think range first, if you think about giving the biggest range of vocabulary possible, you will make mistakes and you'll lower your mark. However, if you play it safe and think about accuracy first, you will have a wide enough range of vocabulary to get a high score. So always think about making fewer mistakes, about getting everything correct first. And then at the end, if you have time, you can think about widening your vocabulary, but try and minimize mistakes first. Let's look at things that you should not do. Of course, you shouldn't misspell words. You shouldn't use words and phrases you don't know 100%. So this is what I call the 100% rule. If you use words you're not 100% sure about, you will make mistakes. 100% means for vocabulary, you know the spelling, you know the grammar, you know the meaning, you know the synonyms, you know the collocations. If you don't know that about a word, and you will know that about lots and lots of words, but there will be some words that you're just not sure about. If you think, I don't really know about this word, don't just throw it into your essay. Use a simpler word or phrase in that situation, because as I said before, accuracy is the most important thing. Don't repeat words from the question or data source. So there might be keywords in the question or in the data source. For example, in the very first example I used, it was all about computers. Therefore, you shouldn't just repeat the word computer, 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 computer. You could vary that word a little bit. Instead of computer, you could write computers. You could use a synonym of that word. So you could use something like information technology or IT or a gadget or a device. Or you could use an example of that word like laptop or desktop. But try to vary your words, especially words that you are from the question or from the graph, because those are the words that the examiner will be looking at to see have you varied them. However, you shouldn't take risks. So if you see the word car, for example, and in your essay it has the word car 6 or 7 times, and you're trying to think of a different way to explain that, and you just make a guess and you change 5 of those words from car to something else. I had one student recently who changed car to vehicle. Vehicle doesn't specifically mean car. Vehicle means car, train, bus, taxi, bike, boat. Can mean anything. So unfortunately, she was incorrect. Only use synonyms that you are 100% correct. No, are 100% correct. So for car, she could have used motor car or automobile, and those would have been correct. But simply stating vehicle is not correct. Don't try and show off your vocabulary. For both task 2 and task 1, this is the thing that IELTS examiners hate the most. Students inserting long, complex, complicated words into their essay that are not appropriate and are not accurate. There are very, very specific words that you need to use in order to describe data or to describe a process, and I'm going to show you them. And these words are not very complex. So stick with those words instead of learning lists of very complicated words and inserting them into your essay. This will lead to mistakes. Mistakes will lead to lower marks. Here is the criteria for grammar. So grammar do's. These are things that you should do in order to get a band 7, 8 or a 9. You must use appropriate structures. So one of the big mistakes that students make is they have been told by a teacher you need to use a range of structures. That is correct. But what is incorrect is when students try to use every single tense in the English language and every single grammar structure in the English language that they know. You are only writing a 150-word report. There is no way that you can use every single tense. There is no way that you can use every single structure. If you're talking about data that's in the past, you might use the past simple or you might use the present perfect. And that's only 2 things that they want you to use, and that is appropriate, because you're talking about data in the past. Appropriate means using the correct structure for the correct thing you're trying to describe. So if you are comparing 2 different pieces of data, of course you would use a comparative structure. Data A is more than data B, and that is an appropriate structure to use in that situation. So always think about the structure that you need to use rather than I need to use 12 different structures in this essay. Use the correct tense. Always look at the dates. Always look at the dates of the line graph or the bar chart or the map. So if you were looking at a map from 1930 and there might be another map in 2015 or 2016, the present day, and then there might be a third map about 2020. So for one map you would be using past, the present tense, of course you'd be using present, and for the future map, of course you'd be using future. So always think about this. This is one of the things that the examiner will be looking for. Use the structures accurately, of course, and use accurate punctuation. So know when to use full stops, know when to use commas. Commas are probably the biggest mistake that students make. Again, this is a balancing act between range and accuracy. For grammar, don't worry about using a wide range of structures because you will do it anyway. If you look at the dates and you use the correct tenses and you describe the data appropriately, you will use different structures anyway. Always think accuracy first. Writing completely accurate sentences. The rule is that the more accurate sentences you have, so the more sentences that have no grammar errors whatsoever, the higher your score. If more than 50% of your sentences have even small grammar mistakes, you can't get above a band 6 for grammar. So the more sentences you have with no mistakes, the better. So things that you should not do. Of course, you shouldn't make careless mistakes, silly mistakes. Everybody makes silly mistakes. I make mistakes every time I write a letter or even a text message. I make mistakes. Everyone does it. You probably do it all the time in your native language. But what you must do is check your work regularly for these mistakes. 2 things that you should do. The first thing is when you write a sentence and you put a full stop at the end, go back and read that full sentence again. And that will help you check that sentence in just 2 or 3 seconds. This is a very, very quick way to check everything. If you do that, you will raise your score immediately. Second thing you need to do is at the end of your essay, when you've finished your essay, you need to read everything again one more time, and then you'll correct your mistakes. You should also establish your common mistakes. So everybody has common mistakes. Some people have problems with plurals. Some people have problems with punctuation. Some people have problems with articles. What you should do is establish your common mistakes, know that you make those mistakes, and then you can fix them. The next thing you shouldn't do is you shouldn't try to use as many grammar structures as possible. We've already talked about this. Don't go into the exam trying to use every single grammar structure. It's about using them appropriately, not using as many as you can. So that's the end of this module. What you should do is you should go back and read anything you didn't quite understand, or look at the official marking criteria and read that and try to understand that. But if you don't understand it, don't worry. Just stick to what I told you about the do's and the don'ts. So let's review what we did in this module. We looked at the structure of all task 1 questions. We looked at the 7 different types of question. We looked at the official marking criteria, and then we simplified the marking criteria by looking at lots of things that you should do and you shouldn't do for each of the 4 criteria. And if you do those things and you don't do the other things, you will get a 7, 8, or a 9. So in the next module, we're going to look at how to understand and analyze charts, graphs, and tables. So I hope you find that useful, and thank you very much. See you in the next module. Goodbye.